Hey everyone, and welcome to WDIM News, my weekly podcast where I talk about sci-fi stuff and some other stuff. My name is Eric. Thank you very much for joining me this week, where I have a lot of cool stuff to talk about, including the brand new trailer for the second season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which dropped last week. That includes an appearance from some very animated guest stars. Paramount also decided to release a 2-minute clip from the second season this past week that I would like to discuss as well. Keeping with Star Trek, I found an article about some unused plot lines from the third season of Star Trek Picard that show us what else could have been, which I would like to share with you and perhaps find out your thoughts on. There was also a new Star Trek video game titled Resurgence released last week that you may not be aware of that has already gotten some really good reviews. So I want to cover that and see if there are enough people interested in me creating a live stream on my channel while playing the game. That's right, this podcast includes some audience participation, so be sure to stay tuned for that. Then finally, I'm going to talk about some other upcoming sci-fi projects that I'm interested in, which include a brand new Blade Runner series from Ridley Scott, a new Terminator project from James Cameron, and an MCU series that may be their most ambitious sci-fi project yet. But before I get into all this and more, I ask that you please hit the like button to help my podcast get out to more people, and make sure that you are subscribed so that YouTube lets you know when my new podcasts and videos come out. It seems like everyone is starting a new podcast these days, and I really appreciate all the support I can get. So first, let's talk about that brand new trailer for Star Trek Strange New Worlds. The trailer began with a shuttle crash, and if you remember my breakdown from the first trailer, I talked about how Uhura discussed in the first season of Strange New Worlds that her parents died in a shuttle crash, but it looks like there's also going to be a scene with members of the Enterprise in an almost shuttle crash, with Ortegas getting them out of it at the last second. That scene shows us that the show is going to be a lot of fun, and just like the first season of Strange New Worlds, it looks like a lot of that fun is coming from Ortegas. I really like that character, and I would love to see more of her past. In fact, in another scene, she mentions that she learned that flight maneuver in the war, and the war that she is talking about is the war between Starfleet and the Klingons that started basically at the beginning of Star Trek Discovery. With her mentioning her experience in the war in that scene, this could mean that we will get more from her past and learn more about what kind of character she is. Also, I noticed in this trailer, just like in the first trailer, we see lots of different planets and locations. That goes with the Star Trek Strange New Worlds theme of going to a new place every week, not staying in the same plot line, not staying in the same location. Unlike, Picard and Discovery, we're going to see this Enterprise crew go to different places every week, much like the older Star Trek series, like the original series and the Next Generation. And this trailer, just like the first one, seems to make a point of that. We also see in one scene a new ship that appears over what I believe to be a Federation ally. I mean, in the scene, we see Captain Batel, who is the same officer that arrested number 1 in the first season that I'm going to get back to in a second. We see her on the ground looking up at this ship, and this may hint that there's going to be a new foe or a reimagining of an old foe from the original series. I mentioned in my breakdown of the first trailer from the season that it looked like we were once again going to take a look at the Gorn after seeing them in the first season for a little bit, and seeing this big ship. I don't think it's a Gorn ship. We saw their ships in the first season, and they didn't look anything like this. So this could hint that there will be a new alien foe that the crew of the Enterprise will have to face at least for 1 week. I also noticed in this trailer, like the first trailer, we saw more scenes of Kirk and La'an together. It's also worth pointing out that at different points in these trailers, James Kirk is wearing lieutenant stripes as well as captain stripes on his sleeves. That leads me to believe that not only will we see Paul Wesley as Captain Kirk in real time, we may also see a future version of Captain Kirk, played by Paul Wesley, come back as captain. Much like in the season finale of Strange New Worlds, we saw a future version of Pike come back and affect, the present and the future of Captain Pike's life. So maybe we see something like that with Kirk, and it seems to have a lot to do with La'an. Of course, La'an's last name is Noonien Singh, and she's related to Khan Noonien Singh, and I think that we're going to get more of that storyline this season too. So there may be something going on with Kirk and La'an this season, and both trailers definitely point to that. We also see a scene with Dr. Mbenga and Captain Pike fighting off characters that look like they are from the Mongolian Empire, but they also have phaser rifles. So it leads me to believe that there's a lot of time travel this season, at least in more than one episode. And in my podcast last week, I talked about the episode titles of the second season, and one of them seemed to have a connection to an episode from the original series in which that crew were thrown into different parts of a planet's past. So like Kirk and Spock were in one era and other members of the crew were in another era. And I tend to believe that that's going to happen this season too. There's also a really quick blink and you'll miss it scene with Spock. And it looks like he's up against a Gorn in space, which will be very interesting. I mean, the first time we saw the Gorn was in the original series episode, The Arena, where that really silly looking thing went against Captain Kirk. So it would kind of be apropos to see Spock go against a Gorn on Strange New Worlds. And that would be, you know, like a fun callback. But to fight a Gorn in space, I mean, that kind of seems not fair for a lot of reasons. But it looks like we're going to see a lot of Spock this season, because in the next scene on the trailer, we see Spock partying with some Klingons. We saw a quick shot of that in the first trailer. But I noticed that when they pan around to the group that Spock is with, there is an alien that is not a Klingon in that group. I wonder if this alien is a member of the Herc. Now, the Herc are an alien species that were only mentioned. They were never seen on screen. They were mentioned on Deep Space Nine as well as on Enterprise, and they were shown in the Star Trek Online video game. On the series Deep Space Nine, when they are mentioned, it's mentioned that they are extinct. So this may be one of the last Herc. They are known to have a history with the Klingons, not always a good history, but this design of this alien does kind of remind me of the Herc from Star Trek Online. So I wonder if this is a member of that alien species. We also get to hear the first words from Chief Engineer Pelia, I think I'm pronouncing that right, who's going to be played by actress Carol Kane. I'm really excited for this character. It's not known yet if she's human, and if you notice, she's wearing 2 badges. So I believe she possibly could be an exchange officer with like another alien race or another planet or another organization, something like that. We have seen that before on The Next Generation. I remember there's an episode where Riker was on a Klingon vessel, and that was definitely interesting. So it leads me to believe that maybe this character is not full Starfleet, that maybe that second badge could mean that, you know, she is part of another Federation. And that would make sense since we know eventually Scotty will be the chief engineer of the Enterprise. So instead of having to kill off the chief engineer every year, which is kind of morbid, I mean, depending on how many seasons Strange New Worlds goes, this could be, it could mean that they're killing off a lot of chief engineers just to get to Scotty. And maybe by that point, Scotty might not want to be, you know, the chief engineer. It's kind of like the drummer from Spinal Tap at that point. But this would be a smart way to kind of get this character off the ship eventually if she's just like an exchange officer and only supposed to be there for like 1 season or a few missions, whatever they say, you know, in canon. We also see a scene of Spock and Nurse Chapel kissing. This relationship was definitely hinted at in the first season of Strange New Worlds. And during the original series, it was very obvious that Nurse Chapel held a candle for Spock, even though I believe she was married for the entirety of that series. But we do see Nurse Chapel and Spock kiss, and I don't know if this is going to be a one-time thing or if we could actually see a relationship. And on a larger scale, I think that the season will be about characters connecting. Besides Spock and Nurse Chapel, we also see Pike and Captain Batel in bed together. If you remember the season finale, she was the officer that took number 1 off the ship. So apparently Pike and Batel have made up. There's also a few scenes of Kirk and Uhura together. I already talked about Kirk and La'an together. Also in the first trailer, we saw there was a maybe romantic scene between Dr. Mbenga and Nurse Chapel. So it's going to be a lot about characters connecting with each other and a lot about connection. And speaking of connection, there is going to be a long distance connection this season, which will be between the characters from Strange New Worlds and the characters on Lower Decks. And we get our first live action shot of Tawny Newsome and Jack Quaid as Beckett Mariner and Brad Boimler, respectively, as they show up to surprise Captain Pike. I loved seeing them. I, of course, had high expectations because I'm a big fan of Lower Decks. And so far, they're hitting them. I mean, I like the look. At first, Boimler seemed a little weird to me. Like, it almost looked like his hair was CGI purple, if that makes sense. You know, on Lower Decks, I don't think they've ever explicitly said that Brad Boimler is a human being. Maybe they have, but I missed it. And I always thought his purple hair was weird. Like, human beings don't naturally have purple hair. So maybe we will get the revelation at one point of what kind of alien species Boimler is. But he does look a little weird. Like, his hair doesn't look right to me. It looks like it's like CGI'd in, or the color is weird or something like that. But the uniforms look awesome. And the characters, the few words that they have in the trailer are just spot on. Beckett Mariner's really excited. And then Boimler, he gets that send off from Spock and he doesn't know what to say. Like, that is just perfect. Like, I loved it. And I love that they ended the trailer on that. I believe that Lower Decks creator Mike McMahon worked on the script for this episode. I think he wrote some of the dialogue for his characters. And Jonathan Frakes, who of course is Captain Riker and has directed many episodes and films from Star Trek, directed this episode of Strange New Worlds. I can't wait for this episode. In my podcast last week, when I went over the episode titles, I hypothesized that this episode would be the 7th episode of the season. So look out for that. But if you're like me, you're going to be watching every week anyway. But again, I just think this is going to be a great episode of Star Trek, possibly one of the best ever. I love crossover episodes when they're done well. And I have really high expectations for this episode. And so far, I think they're nailing it with how the characters look and sound. So let me know if you watch this trailer, what do you think? Does it make you more excited for Star Trek Strange New Worlds? I was already super excited, and now I am more excited if that's possible. Really just showing Mariner and Boimler at the end really just started me laughing and, got me like, I can't wait for the season to come out. So that was a great job by Paramount. And that's probably why they didn't want anybody seeing that picture that showed up that I talked about last week on my podcast that showed up online of Mariner and Boimler in the transporter room. They wanted these characters to be debuted this way in live action, and I can understand that because it went really well. But let me know, what do you think of this trailer? Does it get you more excited for Strange New Worlds? And how excited are you for the Lower Decks crossover? Next, I'd like to discuss the short sneak peek scene that was also released. It was released, I think, 2 days after the trailer that I just discussed was released, and it shows the beginning of the trial of Una Chin Riley. If you recall, in the season finale of Strange New Worlds Season 1, she was taken off the Enterprise by Captain Batel and Starfleet security because it was discovered that she was an Illurian, and that is a race of genetically altered beings. If you know Star Trek regulations, you know that any being that is genetically altered is not allowed to be a part of Starfleet, not just because of Khan, Noonien, and Singh, but there was also an episode of Deep Space Nine that dealt with this. And there have been various other plot lines throughout the years that have dealt with it as well. I really think that they have to deal with this right in the first episode of the second season. So I'm sure that this scene is from possibly the first act of that first episode. If you look carefully, you'll notice that this is actually 2 scenes because there's one scene of most of the crew watching like on court TV like we would. And then later you see the same crew members being interviewed by members of the court. So probably the season may start with them watching this on TV. And then after the intro, we see them testifying on Una Chin Riley's behalf. This scene also harkens back to many other classic courtroom scenes from past Trek episodes and films. The ones that come to mind are Measure of a Man, that includes Data, Captain Picard, and Commander Riker, and the courtroom scene from the film The Undiscovered Country, that includes General Chang, Captain Kirk, and McCoy. Star Trek really knows how to do a courtroom scene really well. They've done it many times. So it looks like we're going to get another great courtroom scene in this season. One thing that I thought was interesting and kind of silly a little bit was we see Captain Batel question La'an, and she mentions her name, like, are you related to anyone? You already let La'an be an officer, and she's already, I think she's lieutenant commander at this point, or maybe even commander. Why would you ask her about her name now? You know who she is. Like, I thought that was weird. I think that was actually put in to remind the audience of La'an's last name, because I think that heritage is going to come in more this season than it did in the first season. But I just thought that was a weird question for somebody from Starfleet security to ask someone that was there on behalf of somebody else. Like, if they were trying La'an, that might have made sense. But if they're just saying, is your last name Noonien Singh? Are you related to anybody? Like, you already know that. You're part of Starfleet security. Why would you ask me that here? But, this looks like a really cool scene. It doesn't really show us too much. It shows that Spock is Spock and that he may say something. But we know in the end that Spock is going to be all right. And so is Una Chin Riley. Because in the trailers that have been released, we see that she is involved in many of these adventures. So this trial must go her way. So it's good that they're going to get this out of the way in the first episode. And if they are going to release a sneak peek, I don't mind them releasing this because we know this is coming. I hate when series release like sneak peeks that are huge reveals or something like that. And really, I don't think we get that in this scene because we know that this is coming. We know that something's going to happen with Una Chin Riley, number one, and that eventually she's going to be back on the bridge and that they're going to have to deal with this in the first episode. So I don't mind that this is here. But let me know, did you even watch this sneak peek? I know a lot of people won't for that same reason. But if you do want to watch it, I don't think there are really any spoilers. And it's a scene that we knew was coming anyway. So I think that if you're going to release a sneak peek scene, this is the way to do it. And just like they've done the trailers, they kind of show a lot without revealing anything. Maybe in the second trailer, they revealed a little bit more than in the first trailer. But even with the sneak peek scene, I don't think that they've really revealed that much. But let me know in the comments, did you watch this scene? How do you feel about it? Do you think that they shouldn't release scenes like this and that it kind of spoils the first episode of the season? So my final note about Strange New Worlds is just following up on a story I did last week on my podcast, and that is to confirm that the third season, not the second season will not be affected, but the third season of Strange New Worlds is indefinitely delayed by the writer's strike. I mentioned last week that this was almost assuredly the case, just because different signals that have been put out to the public by creators and actors, but the producers on Strange New Worlds did come out and say that season 3 is indefinitely delayed by the writer's strike. It was also confirmed that Starfleet Academy and Section 31 will be delayed, which I talked about last week as well. If you want to know more about the writer's strike, I did an in-depth look into that and how it would affect Star Trek. I'll put a link to that in this video and in the description if you would like to check that out. I go into not just what the writers want, but what's going to be affected and what you can expect to be delayed. So if you are interested, definitely check out that video. Again, this isn't a huge surprise to me, but it is sad. I mean, I'm so excited for season 2 that of course I'm going to be excited for season 3. And it looks like we're going to possibly have to wait as long as a year and a half for that season to come out, which is not good. So hopefully the strike gets solved soon and this delay does not take too long. There are other shows that have been delayed. I can't even go through the full list, but each week I kind of go through some shows that I've been excited for, like Strange New Worlds, that do get delayed. If you want to know what shows get delayed, be sure to be subscribed to this podcast and I'll touch on them. Also, if you want me to look into any shows, let me know in the comments and I'll follow up either in the comments or in future videos. One series that I'm really excited for that also confirmed that they are delayed is the new series Blade Runner 2099. Now, this, of course, is a continuation of the film Blade Runner that was released in 1982, and then also the film Blade Runner 2049 that was released in 2017. I know that was a lot of dates right there, but if you know anything about the story, you know it's one of the most famous sci-fi stories out there. It was groundbreaking in 1982. I have a vivid memory of, as a child, I'm going to show my age here a little bit, but I remember my dad buying a brand new laser disc system and popping in Blade Runner and us thinking, wow, it is never going to get any better than this. So Blade Runner always has a special place in my heart because of that. But the first Blade Runner movie, I always just kind of liked. I didn't really like the performance of Harrison Ford. I think Sean Young and Rutger Hauer really carry that film. And without their performances, I don't really think that film is that good. I don't think it's one of Harrison Ford's better films. He's very young in that film, so he's allowed that. But Blade Runner 2049, I love. It's definitely one of my favorite films that has come out since 2010. I think visually, it's just stunning. I love the world that is created there. There are some great performances. Who knew that Dave Bautista could act his butt off? He just plays a great role in this movie. I think Jared Leto is also really good. And this was my introduction to Ana de Armas. I think she does a great job in this film as well. I'm not usually a huge fan of Ryan Gosling, but I thought about this, and the two films that I like that he did, it's kind of a robotic performance, and it's Blade Runner 2049 and the film Drive. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's not a sci-fi movie, but Drive and Blade Runner 2049 are really the only two films I like of Ryan Gosling, and I think he does a good job in this film. So I'm really psyched for this series. We know that, of course, it's set 50 years after the sequel with Ryan Gosling. It's going to air on Amazon Prime. If you notice, I'm talking more and more about Amazon Prime when I'm talking about new series that are coming out that I'm psyched about. Fallout is an Amazon Prime series. I did like Rings of Power. I know some people didn't, but I thought it was a good series and I watched every episode. And now we get this series that will also be released at some point when the filming is resumed after the writer's strike. It was confirmed to go to series in October of 2022, Also at that point, it was confirmed that Ridley Scott, the director of the original Blade Runner, will produce this series. He wrote the pilot as well as perhaps the entire first season. So Ridley Scott is really involved in this. He was also involved in the series Raised by Wolves for HBO. I like that series. It was canceled after 2 seasons. I think it was pretty pricey, but I thought that that was a cool sci-fi series. It definitely has some out there concepts that you really have to think about. And I love stuff like that. So I love that he's going to be a part of this series. And they will be 10 episodes that are an hour long. I think they're billing this as a mini series, that it will only be 1 season. But just like anything else, if it's super popular, I'm sure they'll make more. So let me know, are you a fan of Blade Runner? I am a huge fan of Blade Runner 2049. Not as much a fan of the original, but again, I loved that second movie. And if they can recreate the aesthetic that was created in Blade Runner 2049, I am definitely all in for the series and can't wait. But let me know, are you a fan of Blade Runner? And how psyched are you that there will be a series released on Amazon in the future whenever this writer's strike is over? So now let's segue back to Star Trek and talk about this article that I found that discusses these unused plot lines from the 3rd season of Star Trek Picard. This was really interesting to me, and I have to give it to the website Den of Geek. I don't know if you are familiar with that website, but you should be. I love that site. I check it all the time. And somehow this article got past me, and I found it later on. And basically what this author did was they found all these different quotes from Terry Matalas from different interviews about what could have been in the 3rd season of Star Trek Picard. Basically, characters or plot lines that they wanted to bring in, but for whatever reason couldn't. 9 times out of 10, the reason is money. But you will have the case where an actor can't return because they're on a different project and their schedule doesn't let them to return for whatever reason. So these were some of the plot lines that were talked about. First of all, there was a different ending planned for the season, which would not have been Q meeting Jack Crusher. Instead, it would have been Soji, the character played by Issa Briones in the 1st season of Star Trek Picard. Remember, in the 2nd season, she played a different character, but it would have her character finally meeting Data, her real father, so to speak. That would have been great. I talked about in a prior video where I discussed open plot lines from the 3rd season that these two meeting would have been awesome. And I think they would have also had a great chemistry. Soji just realized that she is a robot and not a human being. And she's in this like governmental position now. And Data, just being born again. And he's always kind of awkward. And now having him being a father, I think that would be fantastic. Trying to see Brent Spiner as this new Data navigate being a father, with Soji trying to navigate being this, important person in government while also trying to figure out who she is. I think that makes for a great dynamic. And I would love to see that in some kind of spin-off like anthology event. I don't think that makes a full series, some kind of like Family Matters, with Data and Soji and all these different androids. I don't think that worked. But I think if you have them, have a story with 6 episodes or something like that, I think that would be pretty cool. And it looks like we almost had that. We almost had Soji meeting Data and them kind of meeting for the first time and starting to get to know each other. But I think that they couldn't get Issa Briones back for whatever reason and decided to go another way. But we could have seen Soji in the 3rd season of Star Trek Picard. Another character that we could have seen in the 3rd season that I know a lot of people were looking for is Admiral Janeway. And there was a plan at one point to have Seven promoted to captain by Admiral Janeway and not Tuvok. While the scene with Tuvok was great, I thought that having Tim Russ back was awesome. He had a relationship with Seven on Voyager, so it totally makes sense that he was the one to promote her. But as soon as that scene was released, fans were already crying that we didn't see Kate Mulgrew return as Janeway, especially since Kate Mulgrew is already a part of Star Trek again in animated form on the series Prodigy. But in the end, we did not get her in this scene. This is what Terry Matalas had to say about her returning. We wanted Kate Mulgrew to be part of 7 of 9's promotion. We have wanted some more Voyager folks to come be part of 7 of 9's promotion to captain. So I don't know who they were thinking about besides Janeway and Tuvok that would have made sense in that scene. Maybe Chakotay. I mean, it might have been awkward because they had a relationship together. Maybe Tom Paris. He returned for Lower Decks. I know it wasn't Neelix, and I'm sure that Harry Kim is still an ensign, so he can promote her. So, I don't know who else it could have been besides Tuvok or Janeway, but it does seem that at one point they did have a plan to have Kate Mulgrew return, but for some reason they did not do that, and it was Tuvok that was in that scene. Keeping with Tuvok, besides the two scenes that we got with him, there was another scene planned that would have seen Tuvok being rescued. Now, I'm not sure when this would have been. It probably, I think, would have been in the finale in place of that scene with Seven as the captain distracting the Borg while all the other teams are trying to destroy the Borg. Because I mentioned that scene doesn't really work because if you think about it, firing on all those ships, they probably killed a lot of people. And that's not really good for optics, if you know what I mean. So in my opinion, I think that probably in the first draft during that part of the story, we saw Seven go on a rescue mission to get Tuvok instead of having to fire on those ships. But for whatever reason, they went the other way and we didn't get a Tuvok rescue scene. Now, that scene would have also included another character returning, and that character is Ro Laren. That's right. Instead of her dying, we would have seen that she survived the explosion and was beamed off to the Intrepid. So this is what Terry Matalas had to say. There was a scene in which they found Ro in the dungeons of the Intrepid with Tuvok and that she had survived. So in the rescue scene with Tuvok, we would have not only got the revelation that Tuvok had survived, but that Ro Laren survived as well, which would have been really interesting. I mean, it's pretty convenient that Tuvok survived after being copied by the Changelings. And even though there was a cutaway line that they talked about, the Changelings did keep higher level Starfleet officers prisoner, it was convenient to find Tuvok at the end of the season and to have him promote Seven. So there was a scene written apparently that would have seen the return of not only Tuvok, but Ro Laren in the bowels of the dungeons of the Intrepid. But for whatever reason, they did not go with that scene in the end. And this last scene that I'm going to talk about, we actually did see, but it's kind of interesting to me how it came about. And that is the mid-credit scene with Q and Jack Crusher. Apparently, that was a last-minute decision. So last minute that Terry Matalas went to Q actor John Delancey on his last day of filming for the second season of Star Trek Picard and asked him to do this scene during the third season. And this is how he pitched it. He said, "Look, I want to bring you back literally in the post-credit sequence for this final season. I will have no time, I will have no money, but I guarantee it will be one of the coolest Q scenes, and it will be touching back to the TNG premiere encounter at Farpoint." Now, I don't know if they achieved that. I don't know if what we saw on screen was one of the coolest Q scenes, but it was nice to see John Delancey return, even though if it was kind of confusing at first. But like I said, it is interesting to me that it seems like just one day Terry Matalas came on set and was like, "I have an idea. I want to end Star Trek Picard this way instead of the way that we have it," and just like walked over to the set and was like, "Hey, John, how about you be Q for one more episode?" And he was probably like, "Yeah, fine." I just thought that was kind of cool how that all came together. But let me know in the comments, what do you think of these scenes? Would you have liked to see any of them rather than what we got? Like I said, I think it would have been cool to see Admiral Janeway. I don't know the real reasons why we didn't get to see Kate Mulgrew come back. It's probably money, and they probably don't want to say that because some people might look bad upon Kate Mulgrew because of that. I, for one, don't. I think that people should be paid what they're worth. And if Miss Mulgrew did not feel that the offer met what she felt that she was worth, then she shouldn't have accepted it. And, and us fans can just cry about what would have been. So I do not hold any fault against the Admiral, that's for sure. But let me know, what do you think of these scenes, and which one would you have liked to see during the third season of Picard? And then my final Star Trek topic is this new game that came out, Star Trek Resurgence. Now, you may not have heard about it because this game is kind of weird. It's kind of been in development hell for a while. I know the first time I heard about it was at least a year ago, if not longer. And even at that time, I heard that there were problems with it. So when you have a game like that, you sometimes have a slow rollout because you definitely have a group of fans that have been waiting for it, but you also have a group of fans that have stopped caring because it's taken so long to come out. But the game is finally out, and I have not played it yet. I did download it. I had a little issue with it on my PC that I now have to order like this special cable for my monitor, which is fine. It's like $12, but I do plan to play it. So this is the plot line I know so far. And again, this is not spoilery at all if you plan to play it as well. But the story takes place after Star Trek Nemesis. So this is before the events of 2009 Star Trek. This is before the events, of course, of Star Trek Picard. And it will definitely have a TNG feel to it, which is nice. I think that maybe this takes place around the same time as Lower Decks, maybe, or possibly Prodigy, but I'm not sure if the exact year is out there yet. It is a Telltale style game. If you are familiar with those type of games, it's not like the shoot 'em up style. It's not an MMORPG like Star Trek Online. It's more like, if you remember, again, I'm going to show my age again. When we were kids, they had these books that were like choose your own adventure. And it said, if you want to do this, go to page 5. If you want to do this, go to page 6. If you want to go to this, page 7. And you would like hold your thumb on the page until you checked out like what was on that page. And if it was something you didn't want to do, you were just like, oh no, I kept my thumb on the page. I'm going back. I'm going back. That's kind of like what this game is. It just, you kind of follow a plot line and you make certain choices and the story slightly changes based on your choices. The story also mostly contains new characters, but it does include Spock. Now, this isn't Leonard Nimoy playing it because, of course, he passed away many years ago. But the voice actor that does Spock is getting really good reviews. I know I read a review from a website that I hold in high esteem, IGN, and they did say that even though they weren't huge fans of the game, they did specifically state that the actor who played Spock really captured the essence of Leonard Nimoy's performance. And I'm glad that that happened because I definitely would not be interested in this game at all if it was some cheap version of Spock. And from the reviews that I have read, the game seems to be favored more by Star Trek fans, which is to be expected. But I have read that the PC version is known to have some issues. That is the version that I downloaded that I also had issues with, so I get that. But it's not uncommon for a game to have issues when it's launched. That's why a lot of people don't even buy a game until like weeks or months after the game is launched when they have figured out all these issues. So far, the reviews are more positive than negative, and they are good enough that it's made me excited to buy it. Which brings me to my next point. So I've been thinking about how to do a live stream on this channel, and I think that this is kind of the perfect opportunity. So what I was thinking is that I would kind of start a new game on Resurgence and live stream while I'm playing it. And then who's ever in the room with me in the live stream can ask me questions, not just about the game, but about whatever, find out my opinion on whatever, just have fun. I've never really done a live stream before, so I don't know what to expect, but I thought it would be kind of cool. I know that a lot of people are interested in this game. So even if you don't care what I have to say, you can see the first 30, 40 minutes of the game and see if you yourself want to buy it. So here's what I want you to do, okay? If you are interested at all in me live streaming Star Trek Resurgence, I want you to put this phrase as a comment, okay? Here's the phrase. Allamaraine Count 24, okay? Allamaraine Count 24. If you're watching the video, I have how you spell it on the screen right now. If you're just listening to the podcast, Allamaraine is spelled kind of like it sounds, Allamaraine. So if you can put that comment in the comments and I get 20 comments that just say Allamaraine Count 24, then I will live stream me playing this game. So if you're interested in that, that's all I need is 20 comments. Usually on these podcasts, I get double to triple those amount of comments. So this shouldn't be that hard. This should be one time in your life that your vote will matter. I don't know where you live. If you're in America, almost assuredly so, but this is one time in your life that your vote will matter. So if you would like to see me live stream Star Trek Resurgence, just put a comment that says Allamaraine Count 24, or if you just know what that's from and think it's funny, you can put that in the comment as well. But yeah, we'll have some fun with this if you want to. So yeah, let me know what you think of this game, and if you want to see me play it, again, put that comment in the comments below. So now let's talk about some stuff that is not Star Trek. I know that most of my fans are Star Trek, but I do talk about other sci-fi stuff that isn't Star Trek, and these are definitely some projects that I am excited about. So first, we have an interview with James Cameron where he discusses creating a new Terminator project. The reason I say project is because he doesn't really go into specifics. So here's what he said about this new Terminator project. If I were to do another Terminator film and maybe try to launch that franchise again, which is in discussion, but nothing has been decided, I would make it much more about the AI side of it then bad robots go on crazy. Now, I think that is really interesting because really, if you go back to the story just on paper of the Terminator, it is about artificial intelligence. But of course, everybody remembers the robots because the robots look awesome and they're shooting and they're killing. And of course, that's what you're going to remember. You're not going to remember the operating system that was running them. But at its core, the story of Terminator does deal with a software named Skynet, which is artificial intelligence. So it makes a lot of sense that they would go back to that. And I think that people are by now so tired of seeing new Terminator movies and that this new kind of concept is the only way to go. I mean, even the man himself, Arnold, is not interested in returning for another Terminator film. There was a quote recently, but hey, look at this. Arnold Schwarzenegger himself has stepped into my studio and he has agreed to read this quote himself. So Arnold, are you ready for this? Yeah, I am. Hear me now and believe me later. I've got the message loud and clear that the world wants to move on from a different theme when it comes to the Terminator. Someone has to come up with a great idea. Oh, thank you, Arnold. Thank you very much for reading that, and I will see you around the weight room. No problem. That was really nice. Arnold Schwarzenegger just stepped in the studio. How about that? But yeah, I mean, if you couldn't understand that bad impression, Arnold is definitely not interested in returning. He thinks that he has played his part in this franchise, and he is probably correct, which is ironic because it sounds like Arnold is up for returning to any other role that he has ever done, but hopefully he didn't hear that, and he's not going to come back and beat me up. But anyway, what do you think about this news? Would you watch another Terminator project? I mean, when it comes to the films, I think I only like about half of them. Like, I, of course, like the first two, and I like the Christian Bale one, Terminator Salvation. The other ones, like, had some cool parts, but I wouldn't call any of them a good movie. But I really, besides the first two films and Terminator Salvation, I haven't been a huge fan. I did like the series Terminator, the Sarah Connor Chronicles, which was canceled during the last writer strike, I believe. So they have done some cool stuff with the franchise, definitely since the original two films. But it will be really hard for them to get this franchise off the ground again. And going this different direction and making about the AI and not the robots may be the smart way to go. So let me know, are you interested in seeing a new Terminator story, or are you just done with this franchise and think that it should be put to rest? Then finally, I want to discuss this project that's coming out in June from our friends at the MCU, and that is Secret Invasion. Now, some of you may not be fans of the MCU because it's all, shooting and heroes and stuff like that. But this series, Secret Invasion, is definitely one of the most ambitious sci-fi related projects that the MCU has done. Now, the plotline kind of started in the film Captain Marvel. So if you haven't seen that film, which a lot of people didn't, during that film, there's a revelation that an alien race of shapeshifters known as the Skrulls has infiltrated Earth. Captain Marvel takes place in the past, in the very near past, in the 90s. So the Skrulls have been here for some time now, and we know that there are good ones and bad ones. So the Skrulls are actually working with the government in some cases, and they have infiltrated the government and are working against them in other cases. And this series will reveal that some characters that have been on screen, like since the beginning of the MCU, all the way back to like Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk, were actually these imposters and we didn't know. They have teased that possibly one or two of the Avengers may have been Skrulls. I don't think they're going to do that to any of the originals. Like, I don't think they're going to say that Hawkeye was a Skrull. They may say that like Rhodey, James Rhodes, was a Skrull. I mean, his character is a part of the series, or maybe somebody from that team. But I would be really surprised if they say that any of the original Avengers were Skrulls. They're also going to confirm that there have been two Nick Furies on screen, the actual Nick Fury and an imposter. In the film Spider-Man Far From Home, we did see that there was an imposter Nick Fury walking around and that he was a Skrull and that the real Nick Fury was in space. So I guess we're going to see what part these two characters play in this larger story. But to me, this series looks like a cross between the story of the invasion of the Body Snatchers, which is one of the most famous sci-fi stories ever, and like a Jack Ryan story, like a government conspiracy story. So I think it's going to be really interesting. And I think sci-fi fans are really going to like it. It's not going to be like one of those like massive Marvel movies where you have to know all this stuff. Like I mentioned that the story started in a prior movie, but I guarantee that you will not have to have had to watch that movie to know what is going on in the series, because this series is going to have such a different tone and really only have one or two characters from that movie. So I'm really excited for this. This series starts on June 21st. So it's the week after Strange New World starts, and there are only going to be 6 episodes. So it's not going to be something that you really have to invest in. And if you want, you could just wait 6 weeks and binge the whole thing at once. But in my opinion, this is going to be really good and probably one of the better MCU projects that has come out. Recently, I seem to like the smaller projects more than the big ones. Like, I really like Moon Knight. That was another short series that came out. So let me know, are you excited for this series? Are you a fan of the MCU, or are you just of the opinion that anything from the MCU is just going to be crap and you're just not really interested in it? Like I said, if you're going to try one thing from the MCU, this might be it. This series might be it. Again, it's only 6 episodes, so you don't have to invest a lot in it, and you can wait 6 weeks and binge the whole thing at once if you want to. So I think this is going to be a good series, and I'll probably be talking about it on my podcast when it comes up. But let me know, are you excited for Marvel's Secret Invasion? Well, that's my podcast for this week. Thank you very much for joining me. Again, the very best way to support me is to just hit that like button right now. And you can also hit the subscribe button so that you do not miss out on any of my future videos or podcasts. Also, if you'd like to see a live stream on the channel of me playing Star Trek Resurgence, remember the comment to use is Allamaraine Count to 4. Either way, thank you again for clicking on this video, and I will see you next time on What Did I Miss?